Welcome to week 4 of Wonders of the Cross, a Bible study we're doing in Hebrews and offering as a ministry. My name's Sharon Thomas from Established Footsteps, and we're just glad you're a part of this study. Some of you might be joining in for the first time. That's why I introduced myself. I know the rest of you who've been a part already. You know who we are as a ministry and who I am as a teacher. But for those of you who are just joining in for the first time, we just want to let you know what we're doing, and we're excited that you're choosing to do that. We've kind of gotten a feel that people are here and there sharing just one video as a standalone. Maybe if something hits you in a certain way and then you feel like you want to share it with somebody specifically that you feel like that wonder of the cross could minister to. We're realizing that's happening some. So that's why I just wanted to go ahead and introduce myself today and make sure that we're all connected. But as a ministry, we believe we're called and we love to come alongside people to cheer them on, to love the Word of God and to establish their daily life steps in its truths. And so we hope and pray that this time in the book of Hebrews will do just that. Cheer you on in your relationship with Christ and help you to walk and live out the truths that these words here are sharing with us. And they're such rich words. So we hope you'll stick with us the whole rest of the study. This is an 11-week study that's going to take us all the way to Easter this year. And so we're glad for you to be along. I do want to say to all of our people who have been doing the study from the beginning, if you've gotten behind in any way, I want to encourage you, just jump in where we're at today and move forward. You can always go back and finish the other part later. But it's never a good dynamic to feel like you're behind and you just can't catch up. You know, there's just this sense of defeat that just kind of precedes you as you're trying to move forward. So just start where we're at today and just move forward. And I know the Lord is going to speak to you today from this wonder that we're going to really listen to and look at carefully. And I'm excited about that. We've been working our way through Hebrews, and we really from the beginning have established that Jesus is God. We're memorizing his resume, verses 1 through 3 of chapter 1, and it very clearly communicates that Jesus is the exact representation of God as he came to earth, and then it just works its way through, and we've been kind of doing that. We're certainly not stopping at all the wonders along the way. We just can't do that in 11 weeks. We're zooming in on some of them, but the first one that we stopped at was in chapter 2, where we see that the cross really positions us as family with God. And Jesus is the firstborn of many brothers. He is the oldest brother, and it sets him up as our brother. We're part of the family. He's the elder brother, and so many implications from that. That was all in the first wonder that we looked at on the second week of the study. And then on the third week of the study last week, we didn't go too far further into Hebrews chapter 2 and stopped at verses 14 and 15. And we saw that as our older brother, Jesus came and he fought Satan over that thing that Satan has been bullying God's children with all through history, and that's death. And death certainly leads us into the slavery of sin when we're afraid of death. And Jesus overcame that. He took Satan out. We studied that last week. It's such a rich wonder of the cross to really get inside of you, to understand that we have that privilege of having the enemy of our souls, the devil, rendered powerless in our life. And so we looked at that last week. Powerful dynamic for us, a message from the Word of God of what the cross speaks to us. And today we're going to be zooming in on this next wonder in chapter 3, verse 6, that tells us that we are Christ's house. We are Christ's house. So let me read that for you. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 6. It says, "But Christ was faithful as a son over his house, whose house we are, if we hold fast our confidence and the boast of our hope firm until the end." There's some really great stuff we're going to look at here in that. But let me take you back to the beginning of chapter 3 to just kind of get you to how we got to verse 6. You know, one of the things about Hebrews that we have to remember is that Hebrews was written to Jewish Christians. And throughout the book of Hebrews, what we see is that the writer of Hebrews, which we don't know exactly who the writer is, there's different theories about different ones. We know that it's God through the Holy Spirit used someone to write this, but historically we don't know exactly who that is. But the writer was writing to Jewish Christians, and throughout the book he continually exalts Christ over all kinds of people, just normal everyday people, above angels. We saw that in chapter 1. We'll see him set Christ alongside Moses and Abraham. In fact, that's what we see today. He sets him alongside Moses because there's this thing that has to be communicated, that we have to get deep within inside of us to understand that Jesus is God. He's far exalted above anyone. And see, for the Jewish Christians, they had such high regard for Moses, and so that's why it's important to do that here. But so it starts and it says, therefore, this is verse 1 of chapter 3. It says, therefore, holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling. You know, that's just going right back to the wonders that we've already looked at, right? Because we're brothers and sisters with Christ. So therefore, holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling. What's the heavenly calling for us? It's life. We don't have to be bullied by death. Well, we talked about that last week. We have a calling of life. That's a heavenly calling. God is the giver of life. And it says, consider Jesus. And throughout the book of Hebrews, there's this consideration of Jesus. Who is Jesus? How do we relate to Jesus? What did Jesus speak and do in our lives through his cross when he made that purification of sins, like it says in chapter 1? So we consider Jesus, and it says he's the apostle, which simply means he's the sent one, and the high priest of our confession. Now, back in chapter 2, verse 17, it mentions Jesus being our high priest. We didn't zoom in on that wonder. It's certainly one of them. You can do that on your own. I would encourage that, and we might hit that some as we move through some of the other wonders in the future. But Jesus, this is who he is, and it's continually saying, look at who Jesus is. Now, it says about Christ, in verse 2, it says, he was faithful to him who appointed him, as Moses was in all his house. So he's saying, look, Jesus and Moses, Moses was given an appointment over the children of God back in the book of Exodus when he led them out of Egypt and the slavery there. He was their leader. He was the leader over the house of God, and Moses was faithful. And this is saying Jesus was too. So it's comparing Jesus and Moses. And then verse 3, it says, for he has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses. So now it's going to take Christ, it's going to set him above Moses. And this is very important for Jewish Christians of this time because they had such a high regard for Moses. They're saying Jesus is higher than Moses. And it says, for he has been counted worthy of more glory than Moses by just so much as the builder of the house has more honor than the house. Okay? So what is this telling us? It's going back to chapter 1, reminding us who Christ is. Christ was not just somebody who came to watch over God's children, over the house and children of God. He actually created all those children. He is the builder of the house. And it says in verse 4, for every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. And we've already established, this has already been established, that Jesus is God. Jesus created the house. Now in verse 5, it says Moses, again comparing Jesus and Moses was faithful in all his house as a servant. I mean, Moses was an amazing leader. He was called the friend of God back in the book of Exodus. So it's not downing Moses in any way. It's just saying, look, this is who Moses is, and Christ is above him. It says Moses was faithful in all his house as a servant. He was an amazing leader. And the purpose of Moses being that faithful one over the house, it says, for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken later. Let me speak into this for just a moment. Probably most of you know, but just to get us all on the same page. Moses was faithful over his house over the house as a servant. What house? Well, when Moses led the children out of Israel, and they went through the Red Sea, and they were on their way to the Promised Land, they spent a lot of time in the wilderness. And during that time, God had Moses, he gave the directions to Moses, all the children of Israel. They built the house of God, which was the tabernacle. And one of the things they constructed was the Ark of the Covenant. And God lived within the Ark, or his presence was present among them. He didn't necessarily live in the Ark, but his presence was among them in the Ark of the Covenant. which was in the house in the Holy of Holies, and there was a separation between God and the people because of sin. Now, when Adam and Eve were created in Genesis, God dwelt within their spirit. That's what our spirit is. It's the place where God dwells. So he was in them and with them, and his presence was just freely accessible to them. But once the sin happened in the Garden of Eden, then God, put a barrier between that, and literally the spirit of man died. And so God, in his mercy, is putting his presence in the house among the people of God as he builds this nation and is taking them to the promised land. He does that in mercy. But there was still some separation because only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies once a year. But they could make sacrifices to God in order to pay for the sins of the people throughout the year. And they did this on a daily basis, and then especially on the Day of Atonement each year when they would go into the Holy of Holies and have that, the high priest, he would do that on behalf of the people. So that was really the house that Moses watched over, and then he led the people as far as the children of God. So he was watching over the house, the tabernacle, and over the house of God's children as he led them. And he was faithful as he did that. And all those things really happened, but they also happened, like this says, for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken later. But then we get to verse 6, and it says, but Christ was faithful as a son over his house, whose house we are, if we hold fast our confession and the boast of our hope firm until the end. So Moses was a servant in the house of God. Christ was the builder of the house, and he was the son over the house. Moses watched over the house of God, the tabernacle, and that housed the presence of God. But Christ watches over his house, and you know what that house is? It's us. We are his house, and the cross speaks this. Now, how does the cross speak to us that we are the house of God? Well, when Jesus died on the cross, one of the things that happened right after he died was God tore the veil in the temple now, which was the new construction of the tabernacle where the Holy of Holies was, and there was a thick veil, and God tore that. He tore that. And that the Bible teaches us that opened the way now for God's Spirit to be able to be birthed into man again. And so his Spirit can be made alive in us again. Now, for a Jewish Christian, it's a really bold thing to believe that. Because all your life you have believed that the presence of God is in the Holy of Holies and you're not allowed to go in there. You don't have any access to God. The high priest has to do that for you. So to even think of being able to be in the same room, let alone that the God of heaven would live inside of you, would come to dwell within you, you've got to really be bold and confident in your faith to believe that. That's why it's saying here, if we hold fast our confidence in the boast of our hope firm until the end. See, these things that the cross had spoken, they had to really grab hold of, because this was just crazy to think that the God of heaven who had dwelt in the Ark of the Covenant would now come to live within them. And that's why we see that part about holding fast the confidence. But you know what? It's not just a big deal for the Jewish Christians to believe that. It's a big deal for anyone to believe that Christ would come to live in me, in my life. He would take up residence here. See, a lot of the time, I might look at my little old life and think, you don't want to live here, you know? I mean, I can feel like an old shack on the poor side of town. Why would Christ want to live in me? And I have to say, if that's how we feel, we might need to think about our bold confidence and the boast of our hope and really listen to what the cross is saying. Because this is telling us that Christ has chosen us, our house, to become his house. He wants to live within us, the one who's higher than the angels, the one who is our the firstborn among many brethren. He is the elder brother, our elder brother, the one who is exalted above Moses and Abraham, all of that. He's God, and he wants to live in me. There's wonder there when we think about that. And that gives us value. That really gives us value to know that King Jesus, Lord of all, maker of all, God, would want to live in me, in my life. But there are other things that this wonder really says loud and clear as well. You know, for the Jewish Christians, they really had to establish this in regard to Moses and the tabernacle, right? But for us, I think we need to, maybe there's something else we could easily get caught up on in this year of 2016. And I think it's that we need to really consider the implication of who owns the house. I've often heard it taught, or I've read some devotionals or things about when we think about Christ coming to live in us, that Christ comes to live in our house. So I should welcome him in, and I should give him access to all the rooms. Like there shouldn't be a closet that I close off and say, okay, Christ, you can have everything, access to everything of me but this closet. Or, all right, Christ, you can do anything you want in my house, just don't come in the bedroom, or don't come where we watch TV. Because, and although that might be kind of inspiring and it might be thought-provoking for our Christian journey as disciples of Christ, to make us think about, how much access am I allowing Christ to have in my life? And I see how that could be a good thing, but really, that's a wrong way of thinking. Because what we're thinking then is, I own my life, and I've invited Christ in, and now he can be in my house, and I just need to make sure that I open up my whole life to him. But that's not really what this says, because this says Christ was faithful as a son over his house, whose house we are. See, when we receive Christ, what we're doing is giving him ownership of the house. And so he then takes over the house. He becomes the owner of the house. And my life is his house. It's the place where he dwells, right? Your life is his house. It's the place where he dwells. And that might seem like a subtle difference, but it's really, really an important difference. He owns the house. And this week in our study notes, we're going to be talking about, what does that really mean? And what does that really look like in our lives? But another implication from this wonder of the cross that's really strong and powerful to me is that when you think about someone taking ownership of a house and moving into that house, when they move in, they bring all their stuff with them, right? And they decorate the house, and that house becomes an expression of who they are. And so in the same way, when Christ moves in and as the new owner of this house, then he brings all his stuff. He brings his grace. He brings his mercy. He brings his goodness and his faithfulness and his joy and his peace. And I get access to all that. And you get access to all that. Oh my goodness, what a wonder that is. That's what the cross tells us. When Christ takes over the house, when he owns the house, he brings all his stuff. He brings all of his stuff. But we also can think about it this way. What's going on in the house? What's going on in the house? I don't know if you've ever ridden down a road in a neighborhood and you've seen houses, and if you ever thought, what's going on behind those doors? Because it's a well-known fact that, things can be going on behind closed doors that they don't look like that on the outside. Houses can be places of rich interaction and relationship and just blessing and peace, but houses can also be places of rottenness too. There's a lot of stuff that can go on behind closed doors that's just not life-giving, that's full of turmoil and chaos and strife and, all of that. And, there's a lot of reasons why that can happen, but one of the reasons that happens sometimes is because there's a confusion about the authority in the house. People that are living in the house maybe are not respecting or giving authority to the one who really owns the house. And so, we're going to be looking this week in our study notes as you work through them about the authority of Christ owning the house in your life, and really looking at yourself and saying, is there chaos going on in the house? Because, when I own a home, I want to set the tone over that home. And Christ wants to set the tone over our lives. And really what should be characterizing that is the righteousness, peace, and joy that he loves because he owns the house. And so we'll be talking about that this week too, about that authority in the house. You know, there's so many amazing implications that come from just looking at this and knowing that Christ makes his home our life. You know, we are his house. We are his house. I love the way that the Message Bible reads this first part of verse 6. It says, now if we can only keep a firm grip on this bold confidence, we're the house. That's what we want to do. We want to keep a firm grip on this and not lose sight of who we are and that Christ has made our life his home. His home. He dwells here in us. We are his house. And so this week we want to get a firm grip on that. And we want to encourage you in that process. You can find the study notes on our website. We also have updated the memorization cards if you want to memorize this verse this week. I want to show you, this is something I have hanging in my kitchen that I had made, and I interchange these cards of the wonders of the cross out on this as I'm trying to focus in on different ones. And so be creative in different ways that you could maybe use these cards, just put them in front of you to remind yourself of these wonders of the cross. But I would encourage you to memorize this one too. If you're pressing on past the memorizing Jesus resume, it's just a good thing to do. But God bless you this week as you study. Let us hear from you. We hope to connect with you some on Periscope this week as we just talk about the fact that we are his house. The cross speaks that into our lives. Have a great week.